President Trump is slapping stiff tariffs on America's top 3 trading partners: Canada, Mexico, and China.
They owe us a lot of money, and I'm sure they're going to pay.
Trump is imposing a 25% tariff on nearly all goods from Canada and Mexico, and an additional 10% on imports from China. Mexico's president negotiated with Trump at the last minute, putting the tariffs on Mexico on hold for a month. Meanwhile, Canada is planning retaliation.
Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs.
Here's how Trump's new tariffs are different.
Okay, so before we dive into how these tariffs are different, I just want to kind of set the foundation, right? So obviously, during this campaign, Trump and his administration talked about these tariffs, and you heard a lot of different, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. So let me just be as clear as possible. I did a little research for us. So essentially, this is what I came up with, right? So tariffs, obviously, they have two main primary reasons why you would impose them on the country, right? The first is to produce additional revenue into the U.S. Obviously, that helps with our economy. It keeps a lot of the money on our side of the state lines, so to speak, or the country line. So it helps us out in terms of monetary value. But it also acts as a pseudo control on foreign trade. So let me break this down. Essentially, it acts as regulation, right? So if you think about some of the problems we've had with China recently, with the whole that's the reason why TikTok was banned in the first place, because a lot of the regulations that we have in the US, they don't follow. That's why you've seen the whole stock market be upended last week with DeepSeek, in terms of them possibly allegedly using open AI's tools to train their tools and stuff like that. So these tariffs are, to me, a negotiating ploy. And before I can even get the video up, we've already seen Mexico pretty much give us what we're looking for, which is increased border protection and stuff like that, right? So when you have countries spending billions, and I mean billions of dollars yearly, in terms of the type of goods, and okay, so for example, with Canada, right? A lot of people don't know, but they're literally on the other side of the Michigan Lake, pretty much on the other side of the water. You can see Canada from Detroit, Michigan, right? So a lot of Detroit gets their electricity from Canada. I don't know if you guys seen it or not, but back right before Trump took office, Canada threatened, when the tariffs was first mentioned, to essentially cut off the power to the 40 some odd million people who they give power to, right? So let's listen a little bit more. Shout out to the Wall Street Journal, but I have a couple of more little tidbits that I'm going to share with you.
And why many economists and politicians say you, the consumer, might have to pay the price. To measure the impact, let's look at the numbers. The U.S. imported roughly $893 billion worth of goods from Mexico and Canada in 20.
Look at that. $893 billion of goods imported from Mexico and Canada alone. This is in 2023. 2023. It didn't even include the numbers from 2024. I have, in 2024 alone, just on food, $46 billion from Mexico. This was in 2024, and another $97 billion from so it's like fuel and energy. So essentially gas and electricity, like I mentioned, them supplying the Detroit area with electric power.
2023. Nearly all of those imports will now have a 25% tariff, meaning if an American importer wants one of their goods, they'll have to pay that tariff to the U.S. government.
Consumers will likely notice this quite quickly in the cost of fresh produce at the grocery store.
Almost all of America's raspberry, strawberry, and avocado supply comes from Mexico, as well as most of the country's supply of beer and tequila and mezcal. On the other side, the U.S. gets about 80% of its frozen French fries, 70% of its lumber, and 60% of its...
Now, not my French fries. Let me tell you something. Me and my son, me and my sons, both of them actually. French fries, jasmine rice, right? Biscuits, bread. Like I don't look like it, but I eat a ton of French fries, right? So if French fries is going to be on the table, I don't know. Might have to, you might have to, I might have to negotiate myself because I love French fries.
It's maple syrup from Canada.
It's a really big deal because at the moment we really don't have tariffs on any goods coming
Yeah,
from Mexico
correct.
and Canada under the free trade agreements that we have in North America.
But Canada's most significant import to the US, natural gas, which makes up 99% of America's supply, now has a 10% tariff on it.
Now that's a huge number. 99% of all natural gas comes from Canada. Now, you would think, okay, if you have all of these billions of dollars, and let's just take a step back. Let's think for a second, guys, because there's always some underlying issues underneath whatever we see on the surface from a news standpoint, right? So obviously they're going to have things where they show us, the general public, and then there's going to be underlying issues. Let's kind of think about this for a second. If you have billions of dollars, meaning, okay, so if they're selling us 99% of our natural gas here in the US, that means that we are obviously paying Canada for the right to get those goods and services, right? So that means that the flip side is true. Excuse me, the flip side is true. We, the US, has a significant amount of revenue coming into Canada in terms of their GOP and in terms of their revenue as a country. So we look at the countries as a business, we are one of Canada's biggest customers as well. Why would there be feuds going back and forth? Could it possibly be? Hold up. Could it possibly be? Because I think I mentioned this before. What about the border, guys? Do you think the border has anything to do with Mexico and Canada? I can think back to when recently, about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, right before Trump took office and stuff, one of the biggest sticking points was the border on Texas. So between obviously Texas runs right through Mexico. They was having a lot of problems there in terms of them not having enough agents and essentially it's just being fucking wide open for people to just come in through the Texas Mexico border, right? But a lot of people don't think about the Canada border with Detroit being literally, I mean, a 10-minute drive across the bridge and you're in Detroit from Canada. You can see Canada from the other side of Detroit, right? So for me, the underlying issues here is, for one, I'm gonna bring up my solo screen because I want to talk to you for a second. So for one, there's always going to be underlying things that we don't know as the general public. My goal for this YouTube channel and these videos is for us to kind of, dive a little deeper into it, but I'm here to gain an understanding. I don't claim to be an expert. There's a lot I need to learn. I understand that shit, right? But I am willing to spend the time and commit myself to learning these things so I can bring more of the truth to you. Am I always going to get it right? I hope so, but probably not, right? It's not about me. I say all the time, it's not about me being right. I want to get it right. What I do understand is America is one of Canada's biggest customers. We're one of, obviously, China's biggest customer and Mexico as well. What's crazy about this is the tariffs was levied on Sunday over the weekend, right? Saturday and Sunday. Mexico has already made a deal and it's centered around the border, right? Canada is trying to play tough, but the thing about Canada is they're in the middle of an election. They're coming up for an election right now anyway. So they don't even have their actually new government in place to even negotiate in good faith. So the existing the existing administration in Canada, excuse me, do not get along with Trump and his administration. They just call it what it is, right? So obviously those negotiations are not going to go well. But I'm going to make a part 2 to this video because we have so much more to dive into. I appreciate you for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in a little bit. Let's get it.